I've been joined first time by the Commissioner in charge of Commerce and Industry in Delta States, Honorable Kingsley Emu. Thank you for coming on the program. Now, this is a big event, the South-South Summit being hosted by your state. Now, could you just give us a sense of what you think this summit will bring to the South-South region and using your state as a case study?
All right, thank you for that question. It's all about regional integration, economic integration, cultural integration, social integration. We have common economies, related economies, especially oil and agric and agro-allied services. What we're trying to do as a region is to promote our economic development and ensure that where we have people are patronized where they have the comparative advantage, in which case within the sub-region, we're not supposed to be dissipating energy, duplicating what other people have. For instance, Delta has 3 major ports, which no other Bray state has. We have Brutu, we have Cocoa, and we have Warri, right? And we're developing the Cocoa Free Trade Zone, which is a massive one. So why dissipate energy trying to create another port when you have one here that's in the making? We have a Warri Industrial Business Park, for instance, which is on 329 hectares of land. It's going to have a huge infrastructural development. It's a mixed development. So if we have such a huge expanse of land, we have huge gas deposit, about 38.5 as a standard cubic feet, because we have the highest actually in Nigeria. Then if you want gas-related businesses, you rather concentrate here instead of dissipating it. But that is not to say that at a consistent level or a subsistence level that other Bray states should not venture into that. But as a state, we have that comparative advantage.
Okay, you mentioned that the fact that you will be going into agriculture. You mentioned the free trade zone. But this actually brings me to the fact that you have a number of industries operating in Delta State, many of them oil companies here. So what comparative advantage will small businesses, which I guess you are trying to oversee in the state and in the region as a whole, trying to move on and move up to that status of a medium, for instance, company. What advantage do they have? How do you think they can leverage in what you're going to give to them to ensure that they grow the businesses?
I think that's the beauty of the summits, because here in Delta, for instance, we're already preaching Delta beyond oil. If you're preaching Delta beyond oil, it means that agriculture provides the platform to run on. And then what we have done clearly is to move from agri-products to agro-allied industries. What we have done is to create a lot of SMEs, a lot of small to medium companies that will take agricultural produce to processing, and that's exactly what we're doing. This year we're going to do 10 industries. For starters, we are almost closing in on the first 4, and that is providing fish feed mills in the 3 senatorial districts in Delta State. These are because we have major fish clusters all around in Delta State. We have the Uwe Fish Farm, which has about 13,000 fish ponds, and then 6,000 workers. We have the Asaba Camp 74 that has well over 400 fish ponds. And we have them in various locations. And the basic needs, requirement that they have, that they need, is the feeds, which is number one challenge, and we import them. Local feeds they don't keep afloat because they don't have a extruder, they don't have the equipment called a extruder to dry them up into pellets, and then so the waste level is on the high side. So what government has done, what Delta State government has done, is to create 4 new fish feed mills, and we're closing out on that. We're doing a JV with Bank of Industry on that level, and it's broad because standalone SMEs, the mortality rate is high because they lack expertise, they lack the discipline to run them. But what we have done through this process is to create a good structure where government has some equity, business people have 35% equity as co-investors, and then you have outgrowers, and it's critical that you have outgrowers. The outgrowers are all the cooperatives who are key in that segment of the economy. In terms of, if you're talking about fish farming, they are fish cultivators, they are pond owners, either in clusters or standalone. They benefit from not subsidized, locally produced feeds, which are cheaper and high in nutritional value.
Okay.
To run.
Now, let's look at the issue of regional integration and trade between the South-South. What areas do you think you will all the states in this region work together? Because it's not just about one state, it's about all the 5 states or 6 states that are about in this region. What ways or what are you planning, do you think that you can do to move it forward in terms of ways to develop your trade, for instance? What policies, what issues are you looking at that will boost economic development?
I think for starters, and I'm already the BRACE Commission is on that, is to develop a data bank, a good research base. You have to conduct a research. And this is a process of trying to talk through the comparative advantage in respective states and be able to dimension them. Once you dimension them, you begin to say that all states should ordinarily produce at a small to medium scale, so for self-sufficiency. But at a larger scale that requires huge capital deployment, you then will begin to leverage on the opportunities that you have within the BRACE states to be able, so that you don't dissipate energy. I talked about Warri Industrial Business Park. I talked about Cocoa Free Trade Zone. I don't see any reason why we should be duplicating such major economic ventures. Warri Industrial Business Park, for instance, is going to require about 1.5 billion infrastructure funding. And it's enormous. It's a development that will spill beyond the states.
So are you saying in essence that all the states do not have to have
they don't need to
free
have all
zones
of
or industrial parks, so to speak?
Yeah, which they should have, but not at that size. And that's the reason for collaboration. If you say you want to have an integration, if you say you want to collaborate, then you must be looking at where you have comparative advantage and emphasize that. So it creates an investment outlet for other BRACE Commission members to participate in. Ditto, it's not only about Delta State. Whatever River State has, whatever Cross River State has, whatever Edo State has, and through research, the BRACE Commission is able to dimension them, put them on the table for everybody to see. Then, at that particular level, we'll begin to put investments in those respective areas. So instead of Delta State putting out like what we've done in Warri Industrial Business Park to set it up, we'll put quite a lot of money. You will get other states to have collateral interests. And that way, we develop the states, we develop the region.
At the bedrock of all of this collaboration that you intend to see in this region is the politics behind it, in terms of the political will of the governors, if they have the same political affiliation, so to speak, if they have the same agenda as a party. Wouldn't that, because if in a state like Delta, Governor Duanho is from a particular party and the next state does not have the same political affiliation with this governor, wouldn't that be some kind of conflict as to carrying out the same kind of policies and executing plans together?
I think that the economy speaks the same language. Politics should speak the same language. It cuts across. You have your comparative advantage. Those challenges exist. But if you watch that votes count today, governors are in a hurry to perform. They are in a hurry to perform the dividends, give the dividends of democracy. So that positive competitive spirit can only lead them to such developmental, to develop their region and their states by implication. I don't see, if we can get this far, if we can come together to set up a BRACE Commission, to get a DG, to get a commission, it is enough commitment to say that there's a political commitment, there's a financial commitment, and there's a social commitment. Social integration is key for us. If we don't intermingle, which we currently do, because we almost have common history. Come to think of it, we almost have a common history. We almost have a common economy in terms of agriculture. We almost have a common feature in terms of oil and gas, except that in some areas it's more. In other areas it's a little bit less. So why try and do exploration in areas where you know that it costs you so much, instead of investing in other areas where it's obvious, it's no longer a potential, it's something that is already ongoing. So I think that it goes beyond politics. It's economics, and they both speak the same language. If it's development, development has no color.
Now, this next question was actually posed to the governor of Rivers State during our breakfast show, and that has to do with environmental degradation, oil spills. They mentioned that the Delta has to go beyond oil to agriculture. What do you think this governor should do to boost agricultural production and development, despite the challenge of environmental degradation and the oil spills that we're seeing in some parts of the region?
Now, it also boils down to regional integration. If we don't have that level of spillage here. Delta State is located on 108 square kilometers of land. And 60% of Delta State is land. 40% is water. We have 163 kilometers of coastal line in Delta State. It means that he does not need to go. It's okay to get at the subsistence level. But if you want commercial farming, and we have enough sufficient land in Delta State, all he needs to do is to acquire land in Delta State and partner with Delta State to develop food. After all, we have a good network of roads. Or they begin to consider building roads within and among the sub-region to be able to. I do not think that he needs to expand on heavily on those on trying to create water from a desert, because it's an environmental challenge.
We've seen that in some parts of the world where water was being created in deserts.
Yeah, but it costs
and
more.
That has actually changed society. That's economy.
But it costs more. Why do that? We're not at a level where we're not at a level of excess sufficiency. You understand what I'm saying? So if we have arable land here, you're better off in Delta State or in other states where they have that same land in Edo to be able to. Please tell His Excellency Governor Mechi that we have enough land in Delta State and he can partner with us.
I'm not just here to talk about Delta Edo, but other states in the region. Let's move on. Let's look at the issue of the market share in the South region, where a lot of oil companies are dominant in terms of the companies are located here. For those companies, the small ones especially, who are trying to also come up to say, okay, we also want to play a role in the economic development of this region, how do you think you would address the issue of market share? What can they do to get that portion that they want?
It's niche marketing because it's competitive. I mean, there's so much money to be made from oil, so you need to go. It becomes an internal strategy of that company to look inwards, run on some research or study, and say to yourself, this is where we want to be. This is a key area that people have not ventured into, and you begin to dip in. Or you collaborate. Banks have merged. They should also start thinking about merging, because if you can't sustain or survive as a standalone, the next reasonable step is to form an alliance between companies that should be able to work together. Merger is encouraged. More research work is encouraged, because it's deregulated, it's liberalized, it's not controlled. So if it's free entry, free exit. All the monies you make are for yourself. So do some research.
Just before I let you go, we talk about free entry and free exit. The issue of tariffs. At what level do you think you would help these businesses and the companies, speaking for other commissioners in the South region, what level of concessions or incentives do you think you would be given to those companies who are willing to come to Delta State, even if they're not here at the moment and want to invest here? And to what extent do you think the government in the South region would help, create an environment for them to come and operate?
Most of the economic zones have their specific incentives. They have tax breaks, they have capital repatriation, they have expatriate quota. All of those exist. Those who are not within that area, currently we're talking to some foreign investors who are interested in setting up some industries here. We are also going to consider them as infant industries and give them that particular protection. You can give a monopoly for 3-4 years to a particular company if you are satisfied with their program, their work plan for 1 year. But it has to be clear, because it's not a situation where you come and say you want land and we give you land, and you say you need some seeming monopoly. I mean, no other entry of related business just to enable you nurture that business, and we'll give it to you, and you become a land speculator. No, we must have deliverables and milestones. If you don't hit those milestones right, we'll cut you off. And those they exist. Tax breaks exist. And even for the regions, even as you talk about comparative advantage, assuming Delta State goes to River State to invest in where we consider that they have a comparative advantage within the sub-region, there are concessions that will be given to Delta State. The profit made from that whole complex, if we're investing in the complex, in that infrastructure, will be shared by practically everybody. So it's a win-win situation in all circumstances. We want to be able to develop the region, we want to be able to develop our state, and go, because government can create all the jobs. It's impossible. So the next possible step is by creating an enabling environment, both at the SME level and the large scale level. And that's why we're emphasizing the SME. We have a 1 billion joint venture with BOI for standalone SMEs. And we have some money, 1 billion for ailing industries and community-based industry in Delta State, because we're trying to develop, industrialize our state through the communities. That way, we take infrastructure to the doorsteps. We now have economic roads, and there are farm roads. Then you begin to have young restive graduates situate in their own locations and begin to manage urban-rural migration. So those are key, and those are the things that we're also taking both at the state level in Delta State and at the Bridge Commission level, which is a superintending organized organ for the South.